I'm Denise Walden with Walden Floral Design, and today we'll be talking about basic wire and tape techniques. What you see here is basic 24 gauge wire, most commonly used for corsages. We have 22 gauge wire. Often we use these for cross and pierce wiring. And then 18 gauge wire, which is used for heavier work. The lower the number, the thicker the gauge, the thicker the diameter of the wire. 18 gauge has a thicker diameter than 22 or 24 gauge. Often we'll use 26 gauge wire for corsages as well. Gently stretch the tape as you roll the wire between your fingers. It creates a much lighter weight covered wire. Practice using 18 gauge so you can get the feel of taping over a wire. The bulkier the wire right now, the easier it'll be on your fingers, and then later you can practice with the lighter gauge wire. Pierce wiring for dendrobium orchids. Dendrobium orchids are a little bit different than pierce wiring other flowers. This is how dendrobium orchids grow on this beautiful, graceful stem. We remove some of the florets. This is 24 gauge wire that I'm using here. Snip it in half. There's a little meaty part, kind of like a chin on dendrobium orchids. But it is so that you don't see the wire passing through the throat of the flower. Pull the wire down, and then we'll tape. It's a good idea to get in the habit of hanging that tape off your pinky finger. It's a nice little floret for a corsage or a bouquet. Insertion wiring is most often used for long stem roses, especially at Valentine's Day. If you have a very heavy-headed rose with a narrow stem, you don't need to do the entire stem. Insert the wire into the calyx, run the wire parallel to the stem, and just a simple hook up. To secure it in place. Avoid wrapping it around and around. Think of a slinky. A slinky does not support anything. So the straighter the wire, the more support you'll have for the rose head. Stitch wiring is a nice technique for broader leaf foliage, for broader leaves. Keep that little stem. Look for the main vein. The easiest way to pierce wire is just gently fold that leaf, half wire. I'm using 22 gauge in this example. Lighter wire doesn't seem to want to pierce as easily, but pass it through so that that main vein is in the center. Draw each side of the wires down, and then tape. grabbing a hold of that short little stem and the wires. This is a great technique to lengthen a stem and also to support other flowers as well. There are some bouquets there that the flowers are very fragile, and a nicely stitch wired salal leaf can support them. See the control that you have with it? You can turn it, you can twist it, and it'll stay in place. Hook wiring is used for flowers with flattened heads that don't have a visible calyx. It can be used for Gerber daisies. However, more often than not, we use insertion wiring for Gerber daisies. Many instruction manuals show to go through the top down through the stem. It's easiest to go up through the stem, through that little disc. This is where you'll need your needle nose pliers. Create the hook, and then pull it on down through the disc until it disappears so that it's not really visible. Hook that tape on your little finger. Avoid the chase when your tape gets away from you and ends across the other side of the shop. After you've wired, gently stretch and pull and twist that tape. You don't have to go all the way to the end, it's just not necessary. But aim for the lightest weight tape that you can so that we're not making the stems bulkier. Alstroemeria does very well with pierce wiring technique. It's often used with flowers with a visible calyx. I like to remove the anthers out of the flowers. Alstroemeria also is known as Peruvian lily, and it's best to just remove the pollen. Sometimes I'll leave the foliage on, but in this case I removed the leaf, removing the bulk. Trim the stem short, going through that thick part of the flower at the base. Draw the wire down, pinch it so it's a little bit closer. When taping Alstroemeria, go a little bit higher up the petals. It protects the petals from bending backwards and breaking off. So just a little bit higher. Get it started, and then you're able to pull and stretch that tape. Pretty little flower. Pierce wiring is great for the spray roses for corsages and boutonnieres. It has a nice thick calyx. Trim the stem off to about a fingertip length. Leaving on too much stem will cause too much bulk. In this case, I'm using a 22 gauge wire. Again, I have a tough time getting lighter weight wires to go through that calyx. Some people will go with lighter weight wires. It's whatever you're comfortable with. Use as light of a wire as you can manage. Pierce that calyx. Draw the two sides down. Hang it on that pinky finger. And secure the stem and wire with tape. Wraparound or clutch wiring is often used for delicate stems, tiny flowers. It's great for solidago, limonium. We're using baby's breath or gypsophila here. And this particular variety is called Million Stars. They tend to have a little bit smaller bloom. It's very durable. Gypsophila. Watch how I bend this in half. Just my thumb and two fingers. You can drop that right into that cluster. Now you'll hold the flowers and the wire together very securely. I'm right-handed. And then wrap that, this is 24 gauge wire, and wrap that around very evenly. And then go ahead and tape that. Again, you have a lot of control with that method. We can use the wraparound method for leather leaf. Now, leather leaf is very, very delicate. Use the lightest gauge wire you can handle for this. You'll find that it can be a little challenging not to break that main stem. So I'm cutting off a few pieces and stripping off the lower leaflets. Again, bend that in half using one hand. Drop that between the leaflets. You'll need to hold this very securely, otherwise your leather leaf fern will twist. Let me show you that again. Strip off the lower foliage. Bend the wire. And drop it in between those leaflets. Secure one of the wires in place and then wrap the other half of the wire around the stem, the wire, completing the technique, and then tape over that. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the recording.